I'm not always calm. I just don't allow you to see me in a position where I'm not being a good example as a leader to you.
Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast, a Ben Kinney training production, where we discuss the concepts of health, wealth, leadership, and legacy. My name is Chad Hyams, and I am joined, as always, by Bob Stewart. Bob, what's the word for the day?
Chad, today's word is pace.
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 I will slow myself down then as I say that one, Bob. It's something you and I are both challenged with.
We are.
We are in what we are calling part 3 of 6 in our emotional intelligence series, where we are diving deeper into each concept. And this one, we're going to be talking about self-regulation. So where does pace come in, and what is it everybody should be listening for, Bob?
One of the interesting things about Ben that I've always found fascinating is this guy very rarely, if ever, gets like 2 up or 2 down. And a lot of that's because he's figured out these tactics to self-regulate. But a lot of it is just based on the pace that you do things at. And so just listen inside of here. First off, just listen to the difference in the way Ben talks versus how you and I talk.
Sure.
Right? This guy talks at a certain pace. You can tell that he's never very hurried. And just consider pace as your word as you listen to this next episode.
All right, so let's jump to our conversation with Ben about emotional intelligence, self-regulating. Okay, Ben. So we talked about self-awareness in the last episode in detail as we're talking about this concept of emotional intelligence. You told us that in this one, we were going to dive into the topic of self-regulation. Give me the definition that you gave us on the quick overview conversation. What is self-regulation in the world of emotional intelligence?
Yeah, it's the second element of emotional intelligence, and HBR, Harvard Business Review, they defined it as our ability to control or redirect our disruptive impulses and our disruptive moods.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about that, because we'd all love to control our moods and redirect bad moods and stuff. Dive a little bit more into that definition.
People who have a strength, an ability to self-regulate, typically don't allow themselves to become angry. They don't allow themselves to become visibly jealous. They don't stomp in or fly into the room like a seagull and poop everywhere, right? They have an ability to control that. Now, you've probably all seen managers who stomp in red face, or even customers in our companies that send the angry email or call in or super mean to people. They actually they don't have high emotional intelligence. If they did, they'd have an ability to self-regulate those things.
You know, again, we didn't necessarily say these were going to all be comfortable conversations that we were going to have. They're just going to be helpful conversations for people. And I got to say, I've had the opportunity to work with you for a long time in a leadership role where you were my leader, where I've been able to be a leader underneath. You clearly have grown into your emotional intelligence. So you used to get angry, and you didn't necessarily self-regulate yourself as much at the beginning. Talk about some situations maybe where you remember being that person who might have become too angry before you understood what self-regulation really was all about.
I mean, if you went all the way back to high school, I've always had a horrible temper. And I remember some kid threw a water balloon at me, and I ran across the street and I punched his window out, cut my hand, broke the window, kid started crying. I had a bad temper. All he did was throw a water balloon at me, but I literally lost it. And by the time I was done graduating and fighting with step parents and going through that process, I made a decision that I wasn't going to allow anger to control me. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't get angry, Chad. We all get angry. We all get emotional. But what can I do to notice my high points, right, before they become high points? You notice your temperature, you're starting to get mad.
Physically, you can feel it.
Yeah, you physically can. And you have to be, as we talked about before, self-aware of those triggers. And you start going down this path, And now if people will say, I've never seen you mad, and I say, have you ever seen me super quiet? And they're like, yeah. I said, that's me pissed. That's me inside wanting to punch you in the throat.
I've said a few things to you where all of a sudden there was 30 seconds of silence. I'll be like, Ben, hello?
So this is a warning to everybody listening to the podcast and conversations with Ben. If all of a sudden he becomes really quiet, you know the response that he probably just generated.
I think in third grade, my school teacher knew that this was going to be a problem because they implemented what she called for the whole class the Ben Kinney rule. And the Ben Kinney rule was you had to think for 10 seconds before you raised your hand. And because I would obviously be like, blah, 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 and I'd say something entirely stupid, or I'd ask the wrong question, or I'd give my opinion without thinking. So to this day, I try to live by the Ben Kinney rule. Thank you for that teacher. I try to think about what I'm going to say before I say it and who it's going to impact. And I've said to my leaders before, hey, is everything that you're saying today bringing value to the whole room or just you?
Say that again.
Right? Is everything that you're saying today, when you stand up, when you raise your hand, when you make a comment, is it bringing value to the whole room or just you? They're making it about them, right? They're making a grievance publicly, and it's harming the entire atmosphere, the entire meeting, because they don't have the ability to self-regulate.
You did that to me recently. We have these big text threads with all our leadership group, and two of us were kind of going back and forth. I was getting a little bit snippy, and you had basically said, like, hey, take it offline. Right? I mean, you didn't it didn't feel like a reprimand. I knew it was, right? But I don't think to everybody else it felt like a reprimand, but it was definitely like, hey, regulate yourself. Like, get this out of this particular, this isn't the venue for that.
Yeah. People who self-regulate don't make impulsive, careless decisions. They think before they act. And in leadership, a lot of times, they think before they speak. They think before they hit send on an email. And I've sent some zingers of some emails before. Now my general rule is I write it in my notepad on my phone, not in the email.
You can't even accidentally hit send.
No. And then I wait till the next day.
That's a good, there you go again, Ben, coming up with a great system and model to be able to use to help with this. My dad used to always tell me that my mouth was faster than my brain, right? And I would talk much quicker than I would think. And it's having other leaders around you, as Bob, you mentioned on our last episode, it's having other leaders around you helping you become aware of these things. Because I know in my time working with you and with my wife, who's a leader in my life, I've definitely been able to learn this one as well with that temper. Yet, Ben, you also mentioned in the description of this, is it wasn't always just too angry. It was also too jealous.
Yeah.
So take us to the other end of that spectrum. Because everyone's like, well, that doesn't really make sense. How does a leader run into that situation? What would your thoughts be on the other end of that spectrum with poor leadership in terms of emotional intelligence and self-regulation?
I think it's our ability to regulate any of our impulsive elements.
Anger and jealousy are just two obvious ones.
Yeah. There's all these things in a way, too excited, right? You ever seen a leader run into their staff every day with a new idea? When I worked at Comcast, arguably one of the worst companies that I've ever worked for, I had one of the best bosses that I've ever had in my life. His name was Dominic, and he was a phenomenal guy. He used to write on the whiteboard at the company. He had on the whiteboard, it said, "The change is." And then every day he'd write whatever the new change that came down from corporate, whatever they said. He never erased "the change is" because he knew that was going to stay there. The change is, and he'd write everything up because companies impulsively change things all the time, right? Comp plans, pricing of their products, right? We've lived and worked in companies that did that in the past, right? The constant change and chaos, that is something that's very disruptive to an organization or a company where you're always walking in and you're changing the commission for your people or the price of your product or the service that you're going to add. There's all this chaos. So what we're thinking about when it comes to emotional intelligence, how do we regulate that? How do we come up with models and systems to mitigate our natural behaviors or our natural moods? Here's an example, Bob. What do you think causes somebody's bad mood?
A previous interaction they had in the day, the fact that they haven't eaten properly this morning, their energy's low, I mean, there's probably 10 other things that immediately come to mind.
Chad, what affects your mood?
The weather.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes down to anything. Traffic, right? What I didn't hear, my phone not getting signal or something along those lines.
Yeah. Not working out, not hydrating, hungover, no sleep, like fight with your spouse the night before, your kids made you late to work, like financial stress. Like there's a million things that actually affect our moods. And then what we do is we carry it around with us and we just drop it in front of everybody else's lives, right? Our spouses, you have a bad day at work, you come home and you just drop all your crap from work right in the center of your spouse's lap, right? We take all these things and we do it. And we have to understand that we can't do that. That's ruining other people. We're not being a good contributor to our family, to our business when we bring our personal life to work and our work life home. So I think about things like, am I in a position right now to have a tough conversation with Chad and Bob? Have I eaten? Am I grumpy? Am I tired? Am I a little bit sick, right? Do I have whatever the new virus that's going around today? Do I have something like that? In some days, and we talked about this, there was last month, I drove to work. I got to the parking lot, Bob. I was sitting in my Ford 150 truck. I started checking my email and working on things. I looked up an hour and a half later. I was still sitting in the parking lot. I put my truck in reverse and I drove home. And I made myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And it's a true story. I realized that if I went into the office today, I was not going to be able to regulate myself. I was self-aware enough to know that. And I sent myself home. Sometimes I go to the movie theater right in the middle of the day. I'll just walk out and say, I need a break. And I'll just go watch a movie from 12 to 2, right? People probably think I'm at a meeting or working. I just know that if I can't control my mood, I have to do something about it.
So it's that bipolar leadership. It's that person who's coming in and they're on one extreme or they're on the other extreme. We want the people who are regulated on some sort of medication that are keeping them even keeled. They're not too angry. They're also not jealous because we know there are those leaders out there who have a superstar in their world and become jealous of that person and almost force them out of their industry as well. That is, again, someone on the wrong end of the spectrum when it comes to self-regulation. People
will look and say like, hey, Ben, why are you always so calm? I know you have bad things going on. I'm not always calm. I just don't allow you to see me in a position where I'm not being a good example as a leader to you. I'm going to kick my butt out. Now, other people, my peers like you guys, I might pick up the phone and call you and say, I'm super frustrated right now. This is not boss Ben calling. Like, this is your buddy Ben. Like, I need to talk to you about this because we all need that person to do it, right? But when it comes to leadership, how are our behaviors affecting others? Can we come up with systems to control that? Whether that's taking a break, eating first, scheduling things in advance. Another system we talked about earlier was taking notes while somebody was talking. Sometimes I'll say, thank you so much for sharing all those things with me today, Bob. I appreciate you getting out all your grievances. I understand that this is a big concern to you. And what I would like to do is I'd like to just sleep on it tonight, and I'd like to think about it. Would it be okay if we got together tomorrow and we talked about all this? Do you feel heard right now? Is there anything else you need to say? Would you give me one day to think on this? Because I know that I'm not going to be responding in the right way. I don't have the self-regulation, the self-control left in me today to have that conversation. So I'm going to postpone it. I'm going to make them feel listened to. They got their grievance out, but I'm going to ask for a time later to talk about it. And those are just little things that you can do to improve how you impact others, to increase your self-regulation, to get you to think before you act. Saving your emails, writing your emails as draft, putting it in notepads, writing out your conversation in advance, writing out your questions in advance, postponing a meeting, asking, would it be okay if we met tomorrow, right? Bringing somebody else in there with you. Come up with things where you have a greater ability to regulate, and you're going to start being seen as a better leader.
Okay. So we want to help you continue to increase your emotional intelligence through this conversation. Ben, you just took us through the second one, which was self-regulation. We're going to dive into number 3 on the next episode, and that is going to be about
Motivation.
motivation. All right, looking forward to hearing that one. We'll hope you'll join us on that next episode. You know, Bob, as we were going through that conversation, all I could be thinking about was how smart my dad was. And everybody out there listening to this, we always thought when we were young that our parents had no idea what they were talking about. And some of us might have been accurate. Yet, as we get older and become parents ourselves, we realize how maybe intelligent our parents might have been.
You realize you just didn't know what they were talking about. It wasn't they didn't know what they were talking about.
Correct. And my dad used to always tell me that my mouth was quicker than my brain, that I would speak before I think. And clearly, all he was talking about was self-regulation and attempting to get me to slow down and self-regulate, which Ben talks about in here. Very powerful for me to hear Dad's message coming back and realizing, boy, if only I had listened when I was younger. Now, what did you get from Ben during that conversation?
I think just, my going into this, pace was my word. And it's really hard to slow down. It's really hard. And I think, technology, the way the world works today, it's training our brains to accelerate, right? Everything has to be fast, and then I gotta have a response, and I gotta have an answer, and man, they just emailed me, I gotta email them back, and they texted, I gotta respond. Slow down, right? The best decisions are made not because you made them fast, right? Now, sometimes you have to act fast, but even inside of that, there's space to slow down, and I think Ben has been such a great example. We have there's no emergencies in our business. He really firmly believes, or there's very, very few, right? Just slow down, right? We're going to make the best decisions, and we're going to be the best leaders when we take that extra time.
Now, how many times have you and I been in a conversation with him and we want a decision now?
Yeah.
And we're not getting it because he's taken his time on that and slowed down.
He realizes, look, that whatever that particular decision is, Chad, if it's not made today, it's not made right now, it's not going to impact our business, a year from now, right? We can take some time and we can digest these things, and we can think them through, and we can make smarter decisions. So yeah, he definitely lives that idea of pace and slowing down inside of self-regulation.
All right, so let's give you some tips here for self-regulation, as we did in self-awareness. 4 tips to help you put self-regulation into play. 1, don't react. Just like Bob was just saying, don't react. Ben doesn't. Practice not having that immediate gut reaction. 2, take a deep breath. How many times have we heard that one? Number 3, institute the Ben Kinney rule, and that's take those 10 seconds, count it out in your head, 10 seconds. And then number 4 is respond with compassion. And we'll discuss that a lot more when we get to the empathy episode of this series. So again, don't react, take a deep breath, think for 10 seconds, and respond with compassion. Excited to keep this conversation going. Part 4 is coming up with our emotional intelligence motivation. Until then, make sure you subscribe wherever it is you get your podcasts from. You can always visit winmakegive.com for more information. And until the next time, remember, do good.